One, two, three, four. Welcome to Crazy Chester. Welcome to Crazy Chester. Crazy Chester's Radio Hour. Welcome to Crazy Chester. Welcome to Crazy Chester. Crazy Chester's Radio Hour. Yeah, Crazy Chester's Radio Hour. Crazy Chester's Radio Hour.
Welcome to the Crazy Chester Radio Hour. My name is Andreas Werner. I'm a record producer, songwriter, and owner of Crazy Chester Records. The theme song you just heard is performed by Wet Willie's Jimmy Hall and Funky Chester. The Crazy Chester Radio Hour is a weekly music talk podcast featuring an eclectic group of guests with musical hearts, minds, and souls. And many of the episodes will dive deep into the rich history of music mecca Muscle Shoals. My guest today is Mark Narmore. Mark is a hit songwriter, artist, and musician who had his songs recorded by Josh Turner, John Michael Montgomery, Shenandoah, Blackhawk, Craig Morgan, Alabama, Brandy Clark, and many others. His song That's What I Love About Sunday was the most performed song on country radio in 2005. Mark has been a good friend and collaborator of mine for several years, and in 2016 I had the pleasure of producing his most recent album, This Old Wurlitzer. Mark, welcome to the Crazy Chester Radio Hour. Thank you so much for being my guest today.
Andreas, always great to hang with you in any form or fashion, buddy. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, for people that don't know, our friendship goes back 6-7 years, I guess, by now.
Sure does, man.
And we've had the opportunity to write songs together and to record an album together, too.
Yes, indeed. It's been fun all along the way. We've been able to eat a few good country meat and three meals together, too, and talk about Muscle Shoals and Nashville and Memphis and all kinds of music history.
Absolutely. And, just the hang time and the lunch time is as precious as the songwriter time.
It's crucial. Yes, indeed.
Absolutely. And sometimes one result, is kind of an idea might start at the restaurants.
Oh, most definitely. Usually it does, doesn't it? There's something about eating and breaking bread and fellowshipping. It's a southern thing. It's a country rural thing, but it's a world thing too. We all like to break bread and sit together in fellowship.
Yeah, and you've had a lot of success being a songwriter. I guess your most well-known song is That's What I Love About Sunday.
Yes, indeed.
And you've been doing this for
32 years.
32 years now.
Yeah, probably a little more than that, but I say 32 because I signed with Rick Hall at Fame in 1986. Actually, I was writing like 84, and Ava Aldridge was sort of taking me under her wing, and Woody Richardson, whom you've heard a lot about from Lexington, he had a little studio Andreas called Woodrich, and it had a little 8-track machine in there. But so really with Ava and Woody, I started about 84, but professionally, I'll say 86 because I got to sign at Fame.
So if we peel back time all the way, what's some of your earliest memories of music? I know Spooner Oldham is your first cousin, so I know that played in some, but what's some of your first memories of music or being around music?
Being around music, my dad had this old phonograph, and if you remember how you could stack, he could seemingly stack 8 or 10 albums, that it would change the albums automatically. You would do you remember those?
Yeah.
So it would drop, and the albums that were dropping onto my dad's turntable would be like the Carter Family, like Sweet Fern. I don't know if you just Sweet Fern, Sweet Fern. Oh, tell me, is your darling still true? Sweet Fern, Sweet Fern. I'll be just as happy as you. So I was hearing that. Also, he liked Tennessee Ernie Ford, which was, 16 tons. He had some local gospel acts that maybe recorded in Lexington at that Woodrich studio I was telling you about. Bands, singing groups that were from around Center Star or Killen or Lexington, and there were 4 or 5 of those, and I can't remember most of the songs, but like Jesus Met a Woman at the Well would have been one of them by the Coram Trio. It's like, well, Jesus met a woman at the well. Jesus met a woman at the well. Jesus met a woman at the well, and he told her everything she had done. So those are my earliest musical memories, Andreas, is my daddy playing those records. He used to work what he called the graveyard shift, the overnight shift at Reynolds Metals there in the Shoals, which was a big employer. He worked 30 years at Reynolds Metals, and when he would come in trying to go to sleep, that was his sort of meditative, get me to sleep type music, was the Carter family and Tennessee Ernie Ford, and Hank Williams was in that mix too, man. I Saw the Light and all those Hank hits. So I sort of had, it's kind of fun to look back. A lot of country music on those first recollections of music, and gospel too.
Yeah. You want to do a little bit of I Saw the Light?
Yeah, heck yeah. Just like a blind man, I wondered how long was the way, farther and gone. Just like a blind man that had lost his sight. Praise the Lord, I saw the light. I saw the light. I saw the light. No more darkness, no more night. Now I'm so happy, no sorrow inside. Praise the Lord, I saw the light. And Hank will have to forgive me, I made up some of the words to that verse.
Well, that's the beautiful thing about those old songs that kind of came part of, just public domain.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily as far as the copyright, but as far as the consciousness, I guess.
Right.
That you kind of make it your own and you reiterate it,
True.
It goes down different generations. Certain things might change or might be adapted to the particular time and setting, but the spirit will always be carried on.
That's a beautiful way to put it there, Andres, that we all kind of sort of make it our own. We put our own art and our own heart into it, right?
Yeah, and early we attended Rick Hall's funeral a couple days ago,
Mm-hmm.
and John Paul White and James LeBlanc performed a version of Amazing Grace to the music of House of the Rising Suns,
Yeah.
which we looked it up a little bit, and I think both of us heard Blind Boys of Alabama do that version first, which is the same lyric and the same melody over a different chord progression. And I think that's a good example of reviving something or have a new interpretation of an old piece of music.
That's a perfect example of it. In the House of the Rising Sun has that relative minor feel, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I can't remember all the chords on that one. That was it. The Animals that had House of the Rising Sun.
Yeah, they had the hit.
They kind of had a few little off chords in there that off the top of my head. They were really cool chords, though. Yeah, man.
Yeah.
the sound that sing a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, oh, but now I see.
Yes, indeed.
So, these were some of your earliest memories of music. Now, when we started preparing our album together, we listened to a lot of songs, and one of the songs you played me was called Mama's Carport.
Exactly.
Which is
yeah.
about you and I guess some of your friends starting some of your early bands and practicing at home. Can you tell me a little bit like some of your early years of actually playing music?
Yeah, the early years of playing, my Aunt Merle, Uncle Johnny and Aunt Merle, they were remodeling their house when I was about 5.5 years old, Andreas, and they asked my mom if they could place their old upright piano, store it at our house, say for 6 months until they refurbished their living room. I started picking out melodies almost immediately. I mean, nothing elaborate or fancy, but my mom saw that I had a musical talent because I could pick out tunes to popular songs that I'd heard on that piano. Well, she kept it. She said, "No, you can't have it back. We're going to buy it from you." And thank my mom for that, for recognizing, the talent at a young age. But as I went along, it was a slow process. I was an only child, Andres, so I did have friends, but I also had plenty of time to be by myself, sort of an introversion factor with me. Learning to play the piano, I taught myself, so every week or every month or every year I would learn another chord or another lick, and it seems like that kept happening, 6 years old, 7, 8, 9, 10. I remember the point where I learned that there were different, like A flat, that there were different keys. I learned that on my own, and it was like a kind of like a miracle worker, Ann Sullivan meets Helen Keller type moment. I'm going like, you're kidding, I can play these songs but in a different key, like in the key of A. And I figured out, that each key had its own 1, 4, 5, the number system, in other words. So when I figured that out, I started playing an A flat, and then I would play songs in the key of B, and I just didn't stick to C anymore. So that was a watershed, Rosetta Stone, if you will, moment. By the time 10 or 11 years old, I would play some in church. They would get me up to play or sing a gospel song or something like that. But at the same time I was playing and learning on this piano, I was listening to WQLT FM stereo radio that was coming in sounding great in my little radio in my room. And the 70s were just inundating me with greatness. I almost couldn't believe what I was hearing, like Alan O'Day, Undercover Angel. I'm just bringing random songs from that era. Blinded by the Light, Manfred Mann and his Earth Band, Jackson Browne to Poco to the Eagles. I was just, and even the harder rock stuff, I was really digging into Kiss.
So that must have been like the mid-70s?
Mid-70s. I was really into the band Kiss. It was kind of against mom and dad's wishes, any mom and dad's wishes, that your son or daughter had like all those Kiss albums, because they had the makeup and they had songs, and the lyrics, they might have been a little bit, if not R-rated, at least PG-13. But as I went along, speaking of that rock, those rock songs, and I was listening to Kansas and Boston, by the time I was 13 or 14, a buddy of mine at church, again, church plays big into my life, as you know, Brent Phillips had a guitar and an amp. I mean, it was a Bentley guitar. It was like pretty cheapo model guitar. But we started getting together, and at his house, he had a piano, like a console piano, that, in their den. So we would sit there and just jam. And we started playing little small talent shows around the area at like age 14. He may have been 16. We really weren't that good, but man, we felt like rock stars. We were playing songs like Knocking on Heaven's Door at high school talent shows that we would sign up for. They would have talent shows back then where you could just get in on the, showcase your talent. But those were the beginnings. Then by age 16, Brent and I progressed, and we wanted to get some more people. We wanted to have a real band. So we asked Rusty Moody, whom he plays guitar, great guitar player. Daryl Triplett, who owns the Sound Shop, who actually I bought the guitar you're playing from, that Washburn. Hey, Daryl. And Anthony Duckworth on bass, who is in Huntsville, Alabama, into the medical profession these days. And Keith Davis and Joe Hudson were both drummers at the time. And both of these cats, man, they had some dynamic drum kits, Andreas. So it was kind of neat. With all this gear, where are we going to play? We had to spill out onto my mama's carport. And Joe Hudson had some Pearl drums, a brand new kit. Everybody was getting kind of big amps. Peavey was huge because we were into Southern rock, Andreas, and bands like Leonard Skinner, Molly Hatchet, man, Allman Brothers. It was like, well, I'm not sure about the Allman Brothers, but Southern bands were playing Peavey PAs and amps, so we had all Peavey. We were covering songs from Atlanta Rhythm Section, Leonard Skinner, Molly Hatchet, Blackfoot, Black Oak, Arkansas. So you can tell, as Southern boys, we were just, that's all we wanted to do was play Southern rock music. So that was my first band. It was called Stillbrook, Still Brook. And we played a few high school dances, like homecoming dances and proms and things like that. And the skating rink, we played overnight gig like from 4 to 6 a.m. one time. All night skate.
Yeah. My first guitar amp was a PV too.
Wow.
And I think, they were just slightly more affordable too than some of the, Marshalls and Fenders out there, certainly.
They were. They're very durable. You could throw them out of a truck, right?
Yeah.
And they just bounce and you go back.
Transistor, most of them, I think.
Yes.
And did you ever get any sorts of lessons, or are you all self-taught?
Did have some lessons during that point when my mom bought the piano. 6 years old, she got me some piano lessons from a lady named Carla Thornton. And Carla was a sweetheart. She was trying to teach me, but what I would do, these were pretty simple songs, I would get Carla to play me the song a few times, and I would memorize it, play it back, and pretend I was reading the music. Something clued her that I wasn't looking at the sheet music, and she kind of knew I was memorizing the songs and playing them back. So she called my mom and said, "Mrs. Narmore, Mark is, I hate to take your money. He's not learning, he already knows how to play by ear, so he's really not learning to read the notes." Same thing happened at age 10. Joan Rickard, who was a really good teacher, I had her, and then Kathy McPeters. So I had 3 great piano teachers, but they all saw that within the first month I was mimicking what they were playing and just playing it back to them. I couldn't read the notes at all. Zero.
And you also, if conscious or not, you had another teacher around you, and that is Spooner, your first cousin.
Oh my gosh, exactly.
How did he influence you, or how did you, knowing what he's been accomplishing, could be something that
Right.
that you could aspire to as well.
It would have been about age 6 or 7. I was telling you about my dad's turntable. On that same turntable, they had a couple of records that Spooner had either written or had played on. So one of them I remember was called The Roadmaster, and it was by Freddie Weller, who's a buddy of Spooner's, and maybe they co-wrote it. Possibly, is that maybe? I think
Certainly, certain songs on that record.
yeah, The Roadmaster. So, and I'm looking at the credits on there, and I see Spooner Oldham, and we called Spooner Lyndon, and we still do in the family. So I probably asked my mom, Spooner Oldham, is that related to Lyndon Oldham? And she goes, yeah, that is Lyndon. That's his nickname. And and I thought, wow, so he's writing these songs for Freddie Weller, and my mom told me, yeah, and he's played on Aretha Franklin, who's a big artist now. I was a kid, so I thought, man, that is pretty cool. So he's writing songs and playing on these artists' records. So by age 7 or 8, I think I had a real cognizance of Spooner's doing this really cool thing. I sort of want to be trying to do that too. He had moved from Muscle Shoals to Memphis, Andreas, and then at that time he was in Los Angeles playing on lots of different sessions, from Jim Croce, my goodness, to Linda Ronstadt. When he would come home, though, like once per year at Christmas, I had a little tape recorder, the little actual cassette tape recorder, and I would get Spooner like off in a room where there was a piano, and I know he probably didn't want to do it. I mean, he played music all the time. Who wants to do their job when they're at Christmas dinner, with family? But he was so nice to me. I would ask him just to play for me, and I would turn the tape recorder on. And you know what? I would throw out requests, and it would be songs. I had him recording Dock of the Bay, which I'm sure he didn't play on that song, but he played it just off the top of his head, a rendition that was so good. I thought, my gosh, this man is a masterful keyboard guy to begin with, but to just play it without ever playing it before. The same way I got him to play a song called The Sting, The Entertainer. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Ragtime song. He said, well, I've never played it before, but I'll try to knock it out for you. And he did this version of it that was just unbelievable. This alternate bass notes it was just unreal. So really, that was a big teacher for me, were those cassette tapes where I'd play them back, basically learn every lick that he did. So I just emulated what Spooner was doing on that.
Yeah. Then, when did you see a studio from the inside for the first time? Can you remember that?
For the first time, that would have been Woodrich, which was Lexington, Alabama, which is like 14 miles away. Woody Richardson had started a studio in 1968 in an old house and had moved to the town of Lexington, built a cinder block, and he had the burlap, he had the ISO booths, Neumann microphones, so good sounding little studio. He actually had some of the spillover work, say, from Fame and Muscle Shoals Sound, and they had lots of people with record deals recording. So there were plenty of people that maybe had a garage band or a church group, the spillover groups that couldn't necessarily afford to record at Fame, or maybe couldn't book time there because it was so booked. Woody would get all these spillover artists, and I would go and stick my head in as a 14-year-old and just be amazed. Woody would let me sit in on the sessions. I actually got to play on a couple of the sessions maybe by the time I was 16 or 17. I remember a black gospel group called the Rocket City Harmonizers, and it's one of those songs that vamped for like 15 minutes at the end, and I remember just so getting into that. But Woody's studio, yeah, he had like some minimal outboard gear, but some Uri limiters and just universal audio equipment, and an Allen and Heath board. I remember he had that. So that was the first one. in Lexington, Alabama. It's no longer a studio anymore.
Yeah, and then you you tell me a little bit more about the timeline, but you also started working in radio.
Right.
How did that gig come about?
Yeah, it wasn't far apart time-wise. When I was going to Woodridge, would have been in the years like 1979, something like that. About 4 or 5 years later, I was first year of college, Andreas, 1983, 84. I was recording little demos at home. I had a Fostex 4-track recorder and a PV amp head for my board that had reverb on it, and a Wurlitzer piano, and I had a bass, and I had a drum. It's called Drum Drops. It was a vinyl record that had different drum tracks, different rhythms. I would find, a drum track I liked, put it down. I would record a bass track, a Wurlitzer track, and I would learn to. That's where I learned to sing harmony on that little Fostex 4-track. But I was doing those demos, and I had recorded some demos at Woodridge and also one at Fame. Piano vocal, maybe Mark Hall and I were friends, so maybe we added like a bass or a guitar. But I was going and wanting to play those original songs on local radio. I was green. I didn't know how to get it done. I was just taking these demos myself, going to different radio stations, and most of the stations in the area were nice, nice, and they'd say, no, we don't play, it's got to be a record on a major label or something like that. That was a nice answer, but they would let me in. Well, WLX in Lexington let me in, played my songs, and did an interview with me, and I was so nervous. Eddie Landtroop, who's still on the air in Lawrenceburg, set me down for an interview, and he played my song. I think I'd recorded it, Andreas, at Fame. Pretty rough looking back sound, but it was an original song.
Remember what it was called?
It was called Holding You Tight. If holding you tight's going to keep me up nights, I'll sleep in the daytime and dream about you. Let me see if I remember it. If holding you tight is going to keep me up nights, I'll sleep in the daytime and dream about you. If holding you tight, it's gonna change bark to bite, then I'll hold you so tight all night. I mean, that's one of my first songs that I tried to write. I mean, it was,
Is that the one you recorded at Fame?
Fame with Mark Hall, yeah. And it probably had piano, maybe a drum machine. Seems like we put a drum machine and a bass, and but Eddie played that, and then he interviewed me. And you know what? I was first year college, so I didn't really have a job, and I was pretty free, wasn't tied down. Eddie said, "Mark, you have a really good voice, and you know what? Our afternoon guy called in and he quit this morning. Could I teach? Would you like to learn how to do this radio job?" And I said, "Well, why not, man? That'll be fun." So within like 30 minutes, he had showed me how to cue the records. He showed me where the news came up. It had like a pot on the board, the big knobs, the pots that you turn. And here's where NBC News comes up, and there was a clock, and NBC News came up right at the top of the hour, so you could fade your song down. And he showed me how to do the weather, and it was basically, I always thought that when you hear radio, you think, boy, I bet that's all scripted and everything. It's all perfected, but it was basically just scribbled down on a piece of scratch paper. Partly cloudy today, high of 73, low tonight 64, partly sunny tomorrow, and I started doing that. I was so nervous at least the first week. Every time I turned the mic on, you could hear a shaky voice. But radio was fun. I mean, I didn't love it as much as I loved the music and the songwriting, but it was secondary in there, and it's been a thing I've been able to go back to and have it as a trade, and it's fun to cut commercials.
Yeah, and so at that time, you'd already been songwriting, and how did that opportunity at Fame come about for you to be signed to Fame and be a professional songwriter?
We're in good sequence, because from the time I started there in radio in '84, 2 years after that, I'd been working at WLX for a couple of years. I changed radio stations to WVNA in Tuscumbia, Alabama. I went from playing country music, George Jones, Haggard, and the like, Vern Gosdin, to playing, say, the Bangles, Bananarama, Venus, Wham, Duran Duran. We were playing that kind of stuff. So the station was involved in a Kentucky Fried Chicken songwriters contest. The owner there was Maudie Darby Bedford and Linda, her now niece, and they knew that I had been working on writing some songs. I was a pretty shy guy, and I didn't play my songs to people much, but somehow they had maybe heard me playing them in a back room or something, and they really wanted me to get in this contest. Rick Hall was the judge locally. This was 1986. And I was very skeptical of any contests. I mean, I don't know why. I just had the feeling that, I'm sure it's all rigged and blah, blah, blah. But I had this song called I Can See Me in Your Eyes. And I had rented an 8-track Fostex recorder from then it was Big Bear Audio in Sheffield. And I rented a board. I just wanted to have some recording gear at home for a week or two and just put down some of my songs, in a demo form. So I played everything on it. I had a bass guitar on it. I think I played Wurlitzer, of course, with a chorus pedal or some kind of effect. The drums would have been a drum machine, like a Roland 707 of the era there. And I Can See Me in Your Eyes, I did the harmonies, maybe double the harmonies. So I had a pretty good sounding little demo on it that I had cut at home. Well, I entered that, and they took it over to Rick Hall, and he listened, and he was, it's hard to floor Rick Hall, but they said he was like, of the contestants, mine was definitely head and shoulders above. So that being said, I won locally, and it went into the national field, which was like 41,000 entrants. Okay, of those 41,000, it made it to like number 9 of the 41,000. So Rick, at some point, I think he was following it, and he liked the song and liked what I was doing. Called me at the radio station in 1986 and said, "Would you like to come and be a Fame writer?" And I'm like, oh, my heart went into my stomach. I'm like, well, of course.
Yeah. Do you remember any of that song by any chance?
Let's see. I can see me in your eyes. I can see right through the other guys that used to love you nights. Now I know that with your love I could never get enough. I can see me in your eyes. Something like that. Some facsimile thereof.
So Rick, is offering you that job, and we talked earlier today, and you said, if that would have been the peak of your career, being able to write for Fame, you would have probably been fine with it.
That's really kind of a wild thought, but like the first thing you ever do, that could have been the pinnacle of my success, and I would have been happy. I would have been a
But
happy
in
man.
many ways, it was just the beginning.
It was just the beginning, right?
So
exactly.
from there, tell me a little bit about how you progressed from there till your first cut,
Oh
which
my
became
gosh.
a big hit.
Yeah, 86 to 89 was that Rick Hall Fame boot camp that we've talked about before, and you're so glad to have gone through it later, but when you're going through it, it's tough, it's intimidating, and it's all of the above. I was a young guy there, and boy, I was scared of Rick. He was so larger than life because he had had so much success, and he was just this cool character, you know. I mean, he was very confident and, you know, a kingpin, just a boss man, and I was very intimidated. Everybody wanted to please Rick, and I did too with my songs. So I was trying to write, at the time we were trying to pitch songs to Nashville quite a bit. So I was writing country songs and what was on the radio. Couldn't get a rise out of Rick on any of those, and to the point where I would sort of get mad and frustrated. I'm like, he's trying to be against, you know, he is antagonizing me. Well, what I didn't know, I mean, he had done everybody before me that way. That was his style of motivation. And like you say, once you make it through that school, it's like a Nick Saban, or, you know, a coach or a Bear Bryant, or you really appreciate it, and it helps you grow not only in music but in life. But I'll tell you, I mean, he was very tough on me because I was an easygoing dude, pretty shy, so I was pretty, you know, it was kind of easy to run over anyway. But he really made me stretch, and just keep rewriting. That was the thing he was always about rewriting the song. Mark, you've got to rewrite it and rewrite to the nth degree. And I was doing that, and I was progressing some, but I still wasn't ringing his bell. You know, he wasn't really writing what he thought was a hit or hit songs. So during 1989, I was just bound and determined, or I was going to quit. I was going to write Rick something he liked, or something that was a hit that somebody around there, especially him, would consider a hit song, you know, great. And I don't know where, it had to have been somewhere deep within me, because I really don't know how it came about. I had this title called "I'll Take You Over Saturday Night Any Day," which that wasn't a really good song, but it used the contrast, you know, the antithesis, the polar opposites, you know. I'll take, and it had over. I liked the blank over blank. So I took out those words and just started substituting words. I'll take blank over blank. And I had a whole page full of just random stream of consciousness thoughts. But somehow I had, in that mesh of blank over blank, there was a moon. One of the lines said moon over Georgia. And that just struck me as looking and sounding very poetic. I didn't know really what it was about. That's sort of the next part of the story. Moon over Georgia sounded like a nice angelic kind of sweet poetic sounding title, because there's the moon and Georgia, and that all sounds, it even sounded, the cadence of it sounded good speaking it without even singing it, you know, moon over Georgia. For some reason, it's like another one of those Helen Keller meets Ann Sullivan, Rosetta Stone moments. I figured out that moon could equate to a poor guy in a song. If it was a story song, you know, the moon could equate, that could be the poor guy.
Is that like the poor guy's son?
Yeah,
like you get the sun and the
right.
moon.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Exactly. And in Georgia is the rich guy with the Ted Turner type with the big skyscraper high rises in downtown Atlanta, and the poor guy was in Savannah or somewhere out in the country, you know. Well, maybe he wasn't in Savannah. Savannah's pretty opulent place. He was out, in Dalton, Georgia, somewhere like that. But once I figured out that could be a story song and Moon could be the poor guy, it was Katie Bar the Door. I knew I had a hit title. I knew it. I just knew. And I knew I had to write it correctly, and I knew it had to be perfect for Rick Hall. And also he had this new band called Shenandoah that he had recorded, and I thought maybe it could even be something for them. In my mind, I thought maybe if he likes it well enough, maybe he'll record it on this band. So I worked 6 months, and I would take it over to play for Mark Hall, and he would give me some feedback. No, it's not there yet. So I had like probably 20 legal pads full of Moon Over Georgia. I had written it for 6 months every day. I rewritten, so many different versions. The more I would rewrite Andreas, the more succinct and simpler the song became, and the shorter the lines became, because I was kind of like from the Nashville school of liking what was going on in Nashville, a lot of lyric. Well, as I went along, I was stripping away lyric, and it was becoming really simple, and the phrasing became simpler, and the version that came out at the end was more universal and simplistic than my complex convolution of, you should have seen what I had at my start. It was very convoluted.
Yeah, and you mentioned that you kind of thought, well, it would be nice that if Shenandoah would cut it, which eventually happened.
Right.
But it didn't get cut by them first, is that right?
It didn't. We demoed it, and actually Marty Rabin sang on the demo, and he sounded great on it. I finished the song and got it to where I liked it and where Mark Hall liked it. And I think Rick, I'm not sure if he had heard it yet. Mark was over the publishing company. So it was played for Rick, and this was a disappointment. And Rick passed on it for Shenandoah when I first wrote it and demoed it. So that's a real hurdle. I struggle to please Rick. And I really write what I know is the best song. I dug deeper than I thought I could. I wrote beyond myself, Andreas. In other words, I sort of reached somewhere that I knew was beyond my talent, beyond anything. It was something spiritual, something I reached and got it because Rick Hall pushed the buttons and made me do it.
Yeah, and then Rick passed on it, but it still got recorded.
Yeah, that was a letdown. Rick passed on it, so I'm like, kind of depressed a little bit about that. But Mark Hall took it to Nashville, played it for Buddy Cannon, who was at Polygram Records on Music Row at the time. He's a super producer and writer. Loved Moon Over Georgia for a guy named Larry Boone, who had a couple of hits. Don't Give Candy to a Stranger. So I'm thinking, cool, Larry Boone. I love his songwriting. Larry Boone is a killer songwriter. So at first it was an honor that a songwriter as good as Larry would think of recording a song I wrote. It was almost a single on Larry Boone. It was not, but it was in contention to be a single. Had it been a single, Shenandoah would have never recorded it. So a few months go by, Larry Boone does not release it as a single. So it comes time at the end of 1989, Shenandoah is about to record their record. Marty Rabin and Mike McGuire were advocating this song, and I didn't even know it. They'd been playing it for Rick and telling him we need to cut this song, and they were advocating for me and Jim Seals, unbeknownst to me. I think that like an older brother, they were like 10 or 12 years older than me, and I was in my early 20s. I think they were protecting me a little bit from the brunt of bad news. If they didn't decide to cut it, then I would have had some bad news to face. If they did cut it, they would tell me. So they were really sort of protective of me that way. Shenandoah, those guys were.
Yeah, and it made the cut, and it didn't only make the cut. He became a big hit for them.
It did, and it was back then. Artists would go 4, sometimes 5 singles deep on one record. It sounded so good, and it was another watershed moment that I remember. I can't believe I got this cut. It sounds so good. The band played so well. Rick produced it, and Robert Byrne, Marty Raven's vocal. It sounds so good, but it was track 9 on the record, which was a little worrisome because a lot of times, I'm not sure if it still happens today,
they front load the album with the singles.
The singles. So I sort of got a feeling single 1, 2, and 3 came, and my song wasn't a single. I'd sort of given up hope, really. Rick tells me this, that Joe Casey, one of the promo men, they had 4 singles. 4 singles. Shenandoah was actually leaving Columbia Records, going to another record label. So you can imagine the promotion team. Shenandoah's leaving. The promotion team's kind of not giving it their full 100% for this 5th single, which happened to be mine. But Rick said Joe Casey lobbied for that single, and if it hadn't been for Joe, it wouldn't have been a single, so I'm thankful to him. Okay, so Rick calls me in the office, son. Well, actually, Mickey Buckins took me to lunch and told me this news at this little meet and 3. And he got a big old grin on his face, and he said, man, I need to tell you some news, Mark. You've got the next Shenandoah single. And I'm like, nearly dropped my plate, and we went back, and we talked about it. It was released, and it was doing okay. It was like 60 to 50 to 58. And Rick called me, and he said, we need to get some promotion on this record. So he said, I'm going to put 2 or 3 independent promoters on this. And I said, yeah, I'm totally in on that if I need to help in any way, So I think we might have split cost on one of the promoters there, and he took care of the other ones. But it really, the song really had a good movement over the course of like 30 or 40 weeks, and went to number, I think it was 9 in Billboard, 5 in R&R. It did that, Andreas, as sort of a last-ditch single with not much promotion from the record label, because that group was already headed to another place, So it just goes to show you, that's sort of been my life, little miracles, maybe for all of us, miracles like that.
Yeah, and you were at Fame for 11 years?
11 years.
You had more cuts, I think probably like There Ain't No Yesterday.
Like There Ain't No Yesterday with Walt Aldridge.
Yeah, that was a Blackhawk single. Was it number 2, number 3, something?
Yeah, it was a number 2 single with co-wrote with Walt Aldridge. And as we've talked about before, Walt was such a mentor and a great teacher for all of us at Fame, and in general in the songwriting community. But because we all got to hang with him and sort of learn from him at Fame, he was, I don't even know how to put beyond words, but his songwriting was at a level super high. It was off the chart. It was higher than any of us, for sure, or so we thought, His musicality was superb. I mean, he was a great player, singer. Not only that, his lyrics just, and Nashville has always been a lyric town, so Walt was a genius lyricist. So you had me and Mike McGuire and Darryl Worley and Stephen Dale Jones under the tutelage of Walt Aldridge there. And Robert Byrne was there too, so some greats to learn from.
Yeah, and although you lived in the shows all your life, in 97, when you left Fame, you signed with a Nashville publishing company.
Yeah. Well,
and I guess from there you started commuting between Nashville and the shows.
I sure did. To Reba McEntire's Starstruck music there, Starstruck Angel music, and it was such a Taj Mahal building. I had went from, Muscle Shoals and Central Star, Alabama, my humble home place there, to this Taj Mahal building on Music Row. I mean, I was a little intimidated, to be honest. We had card keys. We could drive down in the garage. We had elevators, and it was just marble. I mean, it looked like a New York kind of building with the glass and the marble, and it was so fun. I mean, I really felt like a king there. I really honestly did. Things happened where the company was sold after about 2 years, so I was out of a deal. The only cuts I remember getting there, I got a cut on Tyler England, which Garth Brooks produced. And as far as I know, that's the only other outside artist that Garth ever, had production credit on. Very proud of that. But it was called I Drove Her to Dallas, Tyler England. And then after that was a scary period. When you lose a deal, you have a family and kids, man, it can be a dark time because you don't know what you're going to do. At that point, I kept looking in Nashville. This was at a point, Andreas, the Garth era in the 90s was a fat era, and songwriters were getting big, big draws. By the end of the 90s, it seemed like that era had popped, and songwriters were getting cut from rosters, and they were getting less draws. So I was having trouble. I was making meetings each week, meeting every week with publishers, but it took nearly a year to land another deal. In the meantime, I went back to radio. There you go, my little industry I have in my pocket there. I could pull out and go to radio, which was crucial and life-saving at the time. 1999 was about 2000, about Y2K is the timeline for that.
Okay, and after that year, is that when you signed with Jody Williams?
At the end of that year, I signed with a company called March Music, and that's where I met Adam Wheeler, who's been my co-writer and great friend ever since. March had been in town, and they had Gail Davies and Doodle Owens, but still a relatively small company. But I was very pleased, and it just kept me in the music business. It kept me from quitting and having to bow my head and go home. And they were so good and nice. I was there for about a year. Jody Williams expressed interest about a year after that. He and Liz Rose were working together, so they really dug what I was doing. And that's where things sort of began to take off and take shape again. There was a stable of great writers. Kim Patton Johnston was there, Josh Turner, Stephanie and Nathan Chapman, Liz Rose. I'm probably leaving somebody out, but with that kind of talent at your disposal and in-house where you can co-write with these people quite a bit, I started getting cuts, especially the stuff I was writing with Josh and Liz Rose. Started getting a lot of attention at the time.
Yeah, and Josh became a well-known artist too. And
Yeah.
you've had cuts on pretty much all of his records,
Every
all
record.
through his career.
Yes, indeed. I mean, it's a great friendship that started there at Jody Williams, and we hit it off, both being from very small towns and just really loving like Vern Gosdin, George Jones, and appreciating lyrical twists. So, yeah, we've had a great career, and he's been so good to me to include me still on every album to this day.
Yeah, and we, in our little humble ways, returned the favor and put one of his songs,
Yes,
song,
indeed.
on
Money
your
Tree.
album, Money Tree, exactly. And we'll get to that a little bit more. But would you mind maybe playing a song off of the record that we did?
Yeah.
How about You Livin' Does Your Preaching?
There you go. Yeah. Yes.
Mama said, honey, don't forget you're a preacher. And I'm not talking about some big fancy church. Always be kind to a stranger, and your actions speak louder than words. And she said one day when you have children, no doubt they'll put you to the test. Just know you can't scold them for something that you've been doing yourself. 'Cause your living does your preaching. Your sermon's how you live every day. Is it a good or bad lesson you're teaching? 'Cause you're living. Living does your preaching. Preach on, Andreas. Well, when it comes time to leave this world, fly to hear the angels sing. When the preacher stops preaching at funeral, Lord, he won't even have to say a thing. 'Cause your living does your preaching. Your sermon's how you live every day. Is it a good or bad lesson you're teaching? 'Cause you're living. Living does your preaching. Well, you gotta preach on, Hannah. Yeah. Sounding good over there, Brother Andreas. Yes,
Yeah,
indeed.
that's a song that the two of us co-wrote a little while ago, and then we decided to include it on your album.
And
Now,
it sort of has a Staple Singers feel. It's kind of what we set out to do.
I think it was. I had kind of Delbert McClinton back in my mind a little bit
Yeah,
too.
Delbert, exactly.
But certainly with that message in it where it's just kind of like,
Without being preachy, it's a very positive song, but it's not like a, in your face type thing.
Absolutely. So anyway, picking up, you were with Jody Williams music. Now, what led you from there to your biggest hit as a songwriter, that's what I love about Sunday.
Yeah. Adam, it revolves around food again. Around 2004, Adam Dorsey, who was one of the stable of high caliber songwriters there, he was one of the stallions in the stable, if you will. We had a co-write one afternoon, and I was coming up from Muscle Shoals to Nashville, and he calls. He lived in Spring Hill. Let's meet in Franklin at this Chinese restaurant. I have a title I want to tell you about, and I think you'll like it. I think we'll be able to write it. So we had Chinese food there, and he said, that's what I love about Sunday. I want to write a song about the goings-on of Sunday, and since you've lived it, Mark, I mean, he just knew that I could help him paint this song with all the necessary color, southern color. So we pretty much wrote it, Andreas, in an afternoon. We overwrote it. This song, it had those 3 rhymes, and it's fun to play with. Love about Sunday, diddle-diddle Hyundai, diddle-diddle one day. I mean, there was the triplicate rhymes. So we went on and on. We didn't even record some of that. We just had a blast with it.
So there's like a 20-minute version somewhere?
There is. It's out there in space somewhere, but we didn't record it. We were still using tape recorders, even though, of course, CD and MP3s were around. Adam and I were sort of old school. I remember there was a tape recorder sitting there and a cassette tape, and we hit record and play. And Adam knew this cat named Craig Morgan, who had a minor hit. Well, I won't say a minor hit. It was a number 8 hit. But it was on an independent label, which at the time was unheard of for an indie artist in 2005 to have a country hit. I mean, it just was not fathomable. So Adam says, well, I've got my friend Craig Morgan interested in recording this song. Good. And Jody and I and he, we were all like, well, that's good. That's better than a kick in the butt is what we're thinking, because Craig hadn't proved himself at the time. So we're thinking, okay. Then Jody tells me about the end of September, my birthday in 2004. We're walking up the stairs there at the publishing company. Catherine Gooch Blassingame was also there and crucial in our success around there. Jody says, told me and Catherine and the others, well, Mark and Adam Dorsey have the new Craig Morgan single, and we're a little, we're happy. We're not like, we would have been more happier had it been a Tim McGraw single, or an Alabama single. And so that was what was the funny thing about it. Craig Morgan was on an independent label, Broken Bow. So we're thinking, okay, that the likelihood that that's going to be a hit, it's not likely, boys and girls. So we go along. The thing enters the chart like at maybe 70. Every week it was taking these 5-notch jumps, 10-notch jumps every week. And Tony Benkin at Broken Bow at the time, man, he went over and above in promoting this song. He kept in touch with us, and he was getting with all the radio stations, and Broken Bow worked it and got us a 5-week #1 record. And it was another little miracle in Mark Narmore's life that I just have those miracles that happen every once in a while, that against all odds, this independent label had a #1 record and set a precedent for other up-and-coming, independent labels. For everyone involved with that song, Andreas, it was the first #1. It was my first #1 as a writer, my co-writer's first #1, the producer, Phil O'Donnell, his first #1, Craig Morgan's first, Broken Bow Records, Benny over there and Tony Benkin, their first #1. The engineer, who I'm forgetting who worked on it, it was his first. Almost everybody on the record, it was their first #1.
And it was one of the biggest, if not the biggest, song of the year.
It was the Billboard's most performed song that year in 2005. And my buddy Bobby Tomberlin had done some research later, and I didn't know this. He told me it was the #8 Billboard song of the 2000s decade. So I'm so proud to have had that.
Yeah, and that song has been good to you. And most recently, just a few weeks ago, it was performed on The Voice.
Yes, indeed, man.
And Red Morlow, who was one of the finalists of this year's season, you've known him for a while. What's the story there?
Yeah, Red. I knew Red in the early 80s since he was a little boy, say like 6 years old. His dad was our preacher there in Center Star, Jerry Marlowe. Great preacher. I mean, really one of those fervent gospel New Testament preachers. And Jerry, Red's dad, so musical. Great mandolin player, electric guitar, play that Telecaster like anybody, good as anybody in Nashville. He could play acoustic guitar and sing, and so could Red's mother. They sang in a gospel group. Well, during church, Brother Jerry, the preacher, he would sing. Red would play bass, and his feet would be dangling off the bass amp. And Wayne Marlowe would play acoustic guitar, the brother. Joyce would sing, and I would play piano. This is through the 80s, 1983 through 88. Spooner moved back to Alabama about 1989, so Red maybe had 1 year of getting to jam with Spooner every once in a while, but it's always fun to jam with Spooner. But that's my history with Red. Then lately, we catch up with each other every year or two, and we've written some. He's been in Nashville 15 or more years. Red has himself. So we've written and caught up. But right before Christmas, I get this FaceTime call, and it's Red Marlowe, and I'm thinking, wow, that's cool. Good to see you and hear from you, Red. It's amazing that I have an iPhone. I'm glad I have an iPhone because I've only had it a couple of years where I can do FaceTime. So they used that FaceTime conversation that evening on The Voice, and Red had called to tell me he was going to perform That's What I Love About Sunday on The Voice, and I was like, man, I was elated. And the producer talked to me afterward, made sure it was okay. I'm saying, yes, yes, indeed. It's okay to use the FaceTime. I'm so flattered. Yes, indeed. So he did so good on The Voice this year. Opened up country music, real country music. Artists like Chris Stapleton and other artists the past couple of years have sort of been opening up that little hole and letting people experience country music. Red Marlowe took it to the next level with that show and the people he was able to reach and the songs that he was able to perform, like Vern Gosdin, Shenandoah, Craig Morgan, and people were buying those iTunes versions of that song like hotcakes. I mean, after the show, each time they would have a recorded version, that you could go on iTunes and purchase it. So I'm proud for what Red was able to achieve for himself, but for country music in Nashville.
Yeah. And just a minute ago, you mentioned that Red got to, play a little bit with Spooner, and
sure.
You got to play with Spooner. Both of us have.
Yeah.
And both of us share a lot, as far as musical taste and the love for Muscle Shoals, the area, and its musicians.
Yes.
And especially characters like Spooner Oldham and Donnie Fritz.
Oh my goodness.
Who are just kind of live and breathe that music, and in many ways their Wurlitzer playing is an extension of their being.
Oh yeah.
And when we made our album, we decided to call it This Old Wurlitzer and make it a tribute to these people.
Yes.
And we decided to write a song as a tribute, which became the title song. And would you mind performing that?
Oh my goodness, that'd be an honor. I saw Ray Charles playing a Wurlitzer on the TV. That electric piano blew my mind. Gospel tone straight from heaven. I knew I had to have one, and I've had this one since 79. When I sit down behind this piano, it's like the music pours out of my soul. Oh, it's been my go-to when I get them old blues. It inspires me, where I write all my songs on this old Wurlitzer. It's been a good friend through the highs and the lows. It's my prized piece of furniture, broken sound for my broken down soul. Well, I learned from Spooner Oldham and funky Donnie Fritz. When I play it, I lose track of the time. Takes me down rainbow
all the way the muscle shows. I'm so glad this piano is mine. Yeah, this old Wurlitzer, it's like an angel with a crooked halo. Funky old piece of furniture, broken sound for my broken down soul. Broken sound for my broken down soul.
That's great.
Thanks for writing that with me, and we had fun.
Thank you.
Writing
And your family is very important to you.
Yes, indeed.
And you have a wonderful wife, Sandy,
Yeah,
and
yes,
two great
indeed.
kids.
Yes.
They're both going to be really successful in their own right, I know.
Yes, indeed.
And somebody else that it's almost part of your family, though, entered your life, I guess, about around 10 years ago, and that is Hal Oven.
Oh, my
is
gosh,
your current
yes.
publisher and somebody who's, nurtured, I guess, your career and has been a great friend to you.
He's been
How did you meet
a
him?
super friend. After, that's what I love about Sunday. The next year, Jody Williams decided to go to BMI, so he became the VP there. So the writers were taken over by Sony Tree, which was our co-venture partner. So we were at Sony Tree. I was there a couple of years, and there were so many writers there, just didn't get it going. It was at a time where they looking at the bottom line, and they let me go out of that deal. So I had talked to Hal back around 1999. I knew him, and of course I knew Adam Wheeler. Adam gave me my deal at March Music when I came out of my deal, had lost a deal at Starstruck. So Adam and I had been writing like 2003, actually 2002, and through that era, and we were writing some really good songs. Adam is a super talent, but anyway, he had signed with Noble Vision Music publishing company, to which used to be a record label, and I spun Noble Vision Records when I was a disc jockey playing Jim Glaser. Tony Rada was also on the label. So I was meeting with publishers, and of course I met with Hal Oven and Adam over here, and Hal was impressed, and we just got to talking, and it just seemed like a great fit, because when I first signed at Fame, it was more like a boutique company, my first deal with a few writers, with a handful, and Noble Vision had a handful, 4 or 5 writers. It seemed like the perfect fit for what I liked and how I can operate well. And over the years, Hal has taught me so much. He is a business guru. He knows the ins and outs of everything about a record company, publisher, music business. I can come to him with any question. He's mentored me, and I've learned so much. But also, he's just a great publisher, man. He knows a hit, and he knows, for example, how to softly say, Mark, you need to rewrite that such and such line in the second verse, and he's always been right. And we've attended so many music concerts together. It's become a kinship and a friendship. And Adam and Will and Tennille and Claire, all the other writers that have been through here, Dean, feel the same way. It just becomes a family, and he and Susan treat us like family. And you just have to love that. That's nurturing for any writer at any stage of development, young or old, to have that ability to write what you feel. That's what they nurture us to do. and you write plenty of it. You know, they expect us to write a lot of songs, but with writing them how we want to and how we're feeling them. And it's been a wonderful ride here, and I've had all the Josh Turner cuts I've had here with Hal. We recently had an Alabama Christmas cut together on Alabama's new Christmas record. Brandy Clark record this past year that was nominated for a Grammy, Big Day in a Small Town, that CD. We had a song on there. So we've had quite a few cuts together in 10 years, and
There's gonna be more.
oh yeah, amen.
And we've been, talking for over an hour now, and
Oh,
I
that's
know
okay.
you need to head down to
Okay.
Muscle Shoals
Cool.
too. Would you mind maybe, I guess, closing the circle with an old song by Sleepy John Estes, an old
Oh,
blues.
yeah.
It's kind of blues standard that Eric Clapton recorded it, and Greg Allman, and maybe we
Yeah.
just kind of wrap it up with that tune.
Amen. It's been glad to hang with you, Andreas, as always. Well, I never will forget that floating bridge. Lord, I never will forget that floating bridge. Lord, I never will forget that floating bridge. It tells me 5 minutes time underwater I was here. Well, I was going down and I throwed up my hand. As I was going down, I throwed up my hand. As I was going down, Lord, I threw up my hand. It said, please, Lord, take me on dry land. Well, now they carried me in the house and they laid me across that bed. Oh, they carried me in the house and laid me across the bed. Lord, they carried me in that house and they laid me across the bed. I couldn't hear nothing but muddy water running around my head. Play one for us, Andreas.
bum. But my mama, she often told me, son, don't be a bum. Oh, my mother often told me, son, quit playing a bum. Go somewhere, settle down, find you someone. Now all the people on that bridge, they were screaming and crying. All them people on that bridge, oh, they was screaming and crying. All the people on that bridge, they were screaming and crying. Oh Lord, they thought for sure this old boy was dying. So I never will forget that floating bridge. Lord, I never will forget that floating bridge. Lord, I never will forget that floating bridge. It tell me 5 minutes time underwater I was in. It tell me 5 minutes time underwater I was in. Thank goodness for that floating bridge.
Thank you so much for being my guest today, Mark.
Thank you, Andrea. It's been a pleasure, brother.
This was the 16th episode of the Crazy Chester Radio Hour. We taped it at Noble Vision Music in Nashville. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it. Until next week.